They called my stepfather a provider. They were clapping for him. That's the part I remember most clearly, the sound of hands coming together, sharp and approving, like he'd just accomplished something rare and noble. We were standing in my aunt's living room, paper plates balanced on knees, the air thick with food and forced warmth, when someone raised their glass and said it. "Honestly," my cousin Marla said, smiling at him like he was a hero in a documentary, "Rick is such a responsible man." I felt my stomach drop. Rick, my stepfather, nodded modestly, one hand in his pocket, the other resting lightly on my mother's shoulder. He wore that calm, steady expression he saved for public settings, the one that said reliable, the one people trusted without asking questions. "He really stepped up," my uncle added. "Not everyone does." More nods, more approval. Someone even laughed and said, "Your mom's lucky." I stood there with my plastic cup, fingers numb, smiling because that's what I'd learned to do when the truth would make things messy. No one clapped for me. No one knew that I'd worked a double shift the night before, my feet throbbing through the last hour, my eyes burning while I rang up customers who complained about prices I couldn't control. No one knew I'd transferred my entire paycheck that morning so the electric bill wouldn't get shut off. Rick knew. My mother knew. And that was the problem. Rick squeezed her shoulder gently, the picture of a man carrying weight that wasn't his. "We do what we can," he said. I swallowed. What he could do was take credit. What I could do was stay quiet. Because my mother was watching me out of the corner of her eye, her smile a little too tight, her body just a little tense. I knew that look. It meant, please don't. So I didn't. I learned early that silence could be a form of love. When Rick came into our lives, everything stabilized on the surface. The yelling stopped, the eviction notices disappeared, my mother slept through the night again. He paid some bills, fixed things around the house, showed up at events in pressed shirts and calm moods. People liked him. That mattered to my mother more than she ever said out loud. By the time I was old enough to work, helping out felt natural, necessary, temporary. "Just until things ease up," my mother would say, not meeting my eyes. They never eased up. What changed was the expectation. Money became something that moved through me, not to me. My checks went in, bills went out. Rick talked about our finances like they were a shared burden, even though his contribution slowly shrank and mine grew heavier. But in public, he was the provider, the responsible one, the man who stepped up. And I let them believe it. Because every time I thought about correcting the story, I imagined my mother flinching. I imagined the shame flooding her face. I imagined Rick's quiet anger behind closed doors. So I smiled. I nodded. I paid. Later that night, as people started gathering their things, my aunt pulled my mother into a hug. "You really picked a good one this time," she whispered, not quietly enough. Rick stood nearby, arms crossed, satisfied. I watched him accept gratitude he hadn't earned, and something inside me twisted, not into anger yet, but into something heavier. Resentment mixed with guilt. Because part of me wanted to scream, and part of me was still protecting him. When we got home, the house was dark, except for the kitchen light. I kicked off my shoes, my legs aching, my body begging for rest. Rick loosened his collar and sighed. "Long night." I stared at him. "I'm working tomorrow morning," I said. He nodded, absently. "Good." That was it. No thank you, no acknowledgement, just confirmation that things were proceeding as expected. My mother started rinsing dishes, her movements quiet, careful. I leaned against the counter and watched the water run. The lights stayed on, but something in me had started to flicker. What my silence bought them. Silence is expensive. I just didn't know how much I was paying until I couldn't afford it anymore. After that night, the praise stuck to Rick like a second skin. He wore it easily, started leaning into it. When relatives called, he answered with that steady, calm voice, the one that suggested reliability without ever naming the cost. "Yeah," he'd say, glancing at me while I counted cash at the kitchen table. "We're managing." We. That word became a knife. Behind closed doors, managing looked different. It looked like me picking up extra shifts without telling anyone, like setting alarms for 4:30 in the morning and coming home after midnight with my body buzzing and my head hollowed out. It looked like skipping meals because groceries had to stretch, like pretending I didn't hear Rick complain about how tired he was. One night, I came home limping, my shoes soaked through from rain and something sticky I didn't want to think about. Rick was on the couch, feet up, watching TV. "You look rough," he said. I didn't answer. He muted the TV. "Your mom said you might cover the internet bill this month." Might. I dropped my bag by the door. I already paid electric. He frowned, like I'd disappointed him. And there it was again, that word, the expectation hiding inside it. "I'm tapped," I said. He studied me for a second, then shrugged. "We'll figure it out." But his eyes flicked toward my mother in the kitchen, and I saw it land, that quiet panic, that old fear. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. "I'm sorry to ask, just this once." It was never just once. I started keeping mental notes, not because I planned to confront anyone, just because my brain couldn't ignore the pattern anymore. Rick's job changed twice in a year. Each time, the pay got worse, the hours fewer, the complaints louder. Somehow, the responsibility always rolled downhill and landed squarely on me. When I brought it up, gently, carefully, he laughed. "You're young, you bounce back." Bounce back from what? From being bled dry? My mother stayed quiet during those conversations, or she'd say things like, "He's under a lot of stress," or "This isn't easy for him." I wanted to ask when it would be my turn to be protected by silence, but I didn't, because every time I opened my mouth, I saw her shoulders tense like she was bracing for impact. So I swallowed it. The thing people don't tell you about being the responsible one is that it rots you from the inside. At work, customers snapped at me over coupons and return policies. Managers asked me to stay late because I was dependable. Friends stopped inviting me out because I always said no, or yes and then canceled. I stopped dreaming, stopped planning. My future narrowed down to the next bill cycle. At home, Rick grew comfortable. Too comfortable. He'd leave lights on, order takeout without asking, complain about money like it was a storm happening to him, not something he was actively standing under while I held the umbrella. One evening, he said it out loud. "You know," he said, poking at his food, "you're lucky to live here cheap." I laughed, a short, sharp sound that surprised both of us. "Cheap?" I asked. He didn't like that. His eyes hardened. "You don't pay market rent." "I pay everything else." He pushed his chair back. "You're getting defensive." My mother looked between us, like a referee who'd already picked a side. "Let's not fight," she said quickly. That was her favorite sentence. It always meant, drop it. And I did. But something in me shifted, quietly, permanently. I started remembering things I'd buried. Rick correcting me when I talked too much. Rick telling me I was emotional. Rick saying that's not how the real world works every time I questioned him. I'd mistaken that for guidance. It wasn't. It was training. Training me to doubt myself, training me to confuse endurance with loyalty, training me to think my worth was measured by how much I could absorb without complaint. And I was very good at absorbing. The breaking point didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It came with a look. My cousin Marla came over one afternoon while I was homesick, actually sick, feverish, shaking under a blanket. Rick was at the table with paperwork spread out, playing the role again. "You're so lucky," he said to him, smiling. "Most guys wouldn't handle all this." Rick chuckled. "Someone's got to keep things running." I looked up from the couch. Rick met my eyes, and he didn't look away. He let her believe it. Something inside me went cold. Not rage, not tears, just a clean, sharp understanding. My silence wasn't protecting my mother anymore. It was protecting him. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe around me. Pipes ticking, the fridge humming, my mother's soft footsteps down the hall. I thought about how everyone saw us, how they praised him, how they pitied her, how I didn't exist in the story at all. Invisible labor, invisible sacrifice. And suddenly, invisibility felt less like safety and more like erasure. I rolled onto my side and pressed my fist against my chest, trying to slow my breathing. I loved my mother, but love wasn't supposed to feel like this. The next morning, I checked my bank account. I had enough for one more month. One. I stared at the numbers until they blurred, then did something I'd never done before. I imagined not fixing it. The image scared me and thrilled me. For the first time, the thought of letting things fall apart didn't feel like failure. It felt like truth. The moment I stopped protecting the wrong person. The conversation didn't start as a confrontation. That's how these things always get you. It started with a text from my mother while I was on break at work. "Can we all talk tonight, just to get on the same page?" Same page. Another harmless phrase with teeth hiding behind it. I stared at my phone in the break room, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, my coffee going cold in my hand. My body reacted before my brain did. Tight chest, shallow breath, that familiar sense of being cornered without walls. I almost said no. Almost. But old habits die hard, and loyalty doesn't disappear just because it's been poisoning you. So I typed back. Okay. We sat at the dining table again. Same positions, same unspoken rules. Rick leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, legs stretched out like he owned the space. My mother sat upright, hands folded, already bracing. I sat across from them, my spine straight, my palms flat on the table so they wouldn't see them shake. Rick spoke first. "We need to talk about expectations," he said. Of course he did. I nodded once. Okay. That threw him off for half a second. He recovered quickly. "You've been pulling back," he continued, "and that affects everyone." Affects everyone. I waited. Silence stretched. My mother glanced at me, then at him like she was hoping one of us would make this easier. "Go on," I said. Rick cleared his throat. "This household works because we all contribute. Lately it feels like you're resentful about that." There it was, the reframing. Not "you're being taken advantage of," but "you're emotionally unstable." I'm exhausted, and I can't keep paying for everything. Rick's jaw tightened. No one said everything. I leaned forward. "Name one major bill you cover." The air changed instantly. My mother inhaled sharply. Let's not turn this into an attack. That sentence landed wrong, because suddenly I realized something devastatingly clear. I wasn't attacking. I was defending myself, and no one was on my side. Rick scoffed. "You're being dramatic again." Again. I felt something slip inside me. Not a breakdown, but a release, like a knot finally giving way. "I work double shifts," I said, my voice steady despite the storm in my chest. "I pay the electric, the water, the internet, groceries, half the rent. You let everyone think you're the provider while I'm barely sleeping." Rick's jaw tightened. "That's not how it is." "It is," I said. "You just don't like hearing it out loud." My mother stood up suddenly. "Enough." She pressed her hands to the table like she needed the support. "You're both stressed. We don't need to tear each other apart." I looked at her then. Really looked. Her eyes weren't angry. They weren't cruel. They were afraid. And in that moment I understood the entire structure of our family. Rick took, I gave, and my mother survived by pretending not to see. "I stayed quiet for you." They both froze. "I let people praise him," I continued, my voice shaking now despite myself. "I let them believe lies because I didn't want to embarrass you. I didn't want you to feel like you failed." My mother's face crumpled just a little, not enough to stop what came next. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. That hurt more than anything Rick had said, because it erased everything I'd sacrificed. Yes, I did, because if I didn't, you'd have to admit what this really is. Rick laughed sharply. "Wow, so now you're the victim." I turned to him slowly. "No," I said. "I'm the solution you got used to." Silence slammed into the room. Rick stood up, pushing his chair back hard. "You live under my roof." I didn't flinch, and I keep the lights on. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. That was the moment, the exact second I saw it. He had nothing, no leverage without my silence, no authority without my money, no image without my compliance, and he knew it. My mother sat back down slowly, like her legs had given out. "This isn't how I wanted this to go." That sentence broke something in me, because it confirmed what I'd been avoiding for years. There was no version of this where I wasn't supposed to lose. I stood up. "I'm done," I said. "I'll finish this month. After that, I'm out." Rick's face flushed. "You can't just—" "I can, and I am." My mother looked up at me, panic finally breaking through. "Where will you go?" I hesitated, not because I didn't know, but because answering felt like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. "I'll figure it out," I said. That used to be her line. That night, I packed quietly. Every drawer I opened felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Every folded shirt, every book, every charger felt like proof that I existed outside of their needs. Rick didn't help. He sulked in the living room, flipping channels aggressively, like noise could drown out consequences. My mother hovered in the doorway. "You're really leaving," she said. "Yes." Her voice cracked. "I didn't think it would come to this." I looked at her, this woman I loved, who had loved me in the ways she knew how, and felt a grief deeper than anger. I already did, I said softly. I just stopped pretending it hadn't. She didn't stop me. That was the final betrayal. I slept in my car that night. The seat was uncomfortable. The air was cold. My body ached in ways I didn't have words for. But for the first time in years, no one needed anything from me. I stared out at the dark parking lot, the streetlights buzzing overhead, and felt something unfamiliar move through me. Relief. Not peace yet, that would come later, but relief. Because once you see the truth, you can't unsee it, and once you stop protecting the wrong people, the silence starts working for you. When the lights stay on without me. The first month after I left, nothing exploded. That surprised me. I'd half expected chaos, angry calls, dramatic messages, my mother crying into voicemail. Instead, there was silence. Careful, strategic, like they were testing whether this was a phase. It wasn't. I rented a tiny room across town from a woman who never asked questions, and a cat that hissed if you got too close. The walls were thin, the mattress dipped in the middle, but every bill had my name on it, and only my name, and for the first time in my adult life, that felt like freedom. I worked, I slept, I breathed, and I didn't send money. The first call came on the 33rd day. My mother's name lit up my phone while I was eating dinner. Ramen, straight from the pot, standing by the counter. I stared at it until it stopped ringing. Then came the texts. Are you okay? We're worried. Call me when you can. No mention of money. Not yet. That came later. Rick tried next. That alone told me things were bad. You don't have to be stubborn, he said when I finally picked up. His tone was calm, measured. Public, Rick. We can talk this out. I already did, I said. There was a pause. Your mom's under a lot of stress. I closed my eyes. Then you should help her, I said. He exhaled sharply. That's not fair. I laughed. I couldn't help it. That's rich. His voice hardened. You're acting like you were abused. No, I said. I'm acting like I'm done. I hung up before he could respond. That was the moment I felt it, the shift. I wasn't angry anymore. I was unreachable. Things unraveled slowly after that. Not publicly, not at first. Relatives noticed little things. Rick stopped showing up to gatherings. My mother started making excuses. Bills went unpaid. The car insurance lapsed. The lights flickered, literally this time. And without me there to absorb the damage, the cracks became visible. People started asking questions. Not because they cared about me, but because the story stopped making sense. I ran into my aunt at the grocery store one afternoon. She looked surprised to see me. Thinner, tired. Oh, she said, I haven't seen you around. I smiled politely. I moved out. Her eyebrows knit together. Really? Why? I hesitated. Old instincts tugged at me. Smooth it over, protect the lie. Then I thought about my empty bank account, my double shifts, my car nights. I was paying most of the bills. I couldn't do it anymore. Her face changed. Not disbelief, recognition. Oh, she said quietly. That was all it took. I didn't rant. I didn't expose. I didn't chase validation. I just told the truth and let it sit there like a dropped glass. The calls from my mother grew desperate from my mother. We're struggling, she said one night, her voice small. Rick's hours got cut again. I leaned against my kitchen counter, the hum of my own fridge behind me, paid for by me. I'm sorry, I said. She waited, for the old ending, for the rescue. It didn't come. You could help, she whispered. I closed my eyes. I already did, for years. She started crying then, real crying, not the controlled kind. I didn't mean for this to happen, she said. I believed her. That didn't change anything. Mom, I said gently, you let me disappear. Silence. That silence wasn't punishment. It was consequence. The final blow came months later at a family gathering I almost didn't attend. Rick was there, quieter, smaller somehow. The confidence that used to wrap around him like armor had cracks now. No one praised him. No one raised a glass. Someone asked about work and he deflected. Someone else mentioned money and the room went tight. Then my cousin Marla, same one who'd started it all, looked at me. You're doing well, she said. Not a question, a statement. I nodded. I am. Rick didn't look at me. And in that moment, I understood the real revenge. Not humiliation, replacement. They'd lost their safety net, their quiet solution, their invisible provider, and they had no story to cover the gap. I left early that night, didn't say goodbye. As I drove home, the streetlights blurred past my windshield, and I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who stayed quiet to keep the peace, who thought love meant endurance, who confused loyalty with self-erasure. She was gone, not broken, finished. I parked outside my apartment, cut the engine, and sat there for a moment in the dark. The lights inside were on, and this time they were on because I chose it, because I paid for it, because I finally stopped protecting people who were comfortable watching me burn. Some families fall apart when the truth comes out. Mine fell apart when the truth stopped being subsidized, and they'll live with that longer than I ever lived with their praise.